Okay, so onto the program. So I'm going to turn it over to Greg to introduce our
Lucky you.
speaker.
Oh, wow, look, we do have a slide. You had no idea. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Greg.
The guest this morning is Scott Adair, as I mentioned. He's the Director of Economic Development for the County of Humboldt. Scott is a Santa Cruz native and comes to Humboldt County via Salt Lake City, Utah. Scott attempted to come to California from Utah and live in the Shasta County in the Shasta area, the city of Shasta area, but the car fire had other plans for him. So he now owns a beautiful lot in the Shasta area. Is that for sale currently, or is that?
Oh no, everything's for sale.
Yeah. Cheap land in Shasta County. Anyway, so the car fire and Scott's tragedy was our good fortune in Humboldt County because, as he tells the story, he was on the phone and trying to deal with FEMA and various things, and on his phone popped up a job listing for the Economic Development Director for Humboldt County, and he sent in the application quickly via the phone, and I was fortunate enough to be on the hiring committee, and so I get free drinks from Scott now. Anyway, there's a lot going on at the county, as you might know, but in particular, Scott's going to talk about the Project Trellis, which some of you may have heard about and is moving forward rather rapidly. So let's give a warm Arcata, whatever we're called, the Sunrise Rotary Club of Arcata.
And I can get on the internet here, right? I wanted to pull up something.
Get on the screen.
That's spotty.
Quick browser for me. Good morning, everyone. I apologize that I'm speaking to you while I'm browsing the internet. Oh, we're not connected. Okay. I'll just get started, and if I can pull up the county website later, I will. My name is Scott Adair, and I'm very pleased to be here this morning. I recognize some of you, some of your faces seem new to me. My former landlord is here, so I'm really glad I cleaned the place before I left. But when Greg reached out to me, he indicated that your group might be interested in learning a little bit more about Project Trellis, which is just one of several programs that our office administers for the county. The county's Office of Economic Development is a division of the CAO's office, which is the County Administrative Office. The CAO's office includes other county agencies like purchasing, IT, the budget team, etc. So we're attached to the CAO's office and work on a variety of county initiatives, which include our office staffs and clerks, the Headwaters Fund Board. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Headwaters, the Workforce Development Board, amongst others, and then also Project Trellis. Awesome, thank you. So, what is Project Trellis? Project Trellis is a support initiative aimed at Humboldt County's cannabis industry. We have other initiatives aimed at other industries. For example, we're working on one for dairy right now. I just have to get that out there because when I presented at Sunrise in Fortuna, I talked a lot about cannabis, and someone said, well, why are you not helping the dairy industry? We do have initiatives for many different industries. This is just one of them, but it is one that has received a lot of attention lately. Does anyone's business activities or professional activities here overlap with cannabis at all? Just curious.
The other way.
Okay.
No. Yes. Everybody does.
So the county budget is approximately $450 million, and Of the revenue side of that, revenues from taxes, about 85 or so million dollars. We pull in revenues from other sources, but that's about our tax revenue. Of that, $20 million is cannabis from our cultivation tax. So if you do the math, a significant portion of our operating capital on the tax revenue side comes from the cannabis industry. So the board of supervisors recognized that if a particular industry is that critical to the revenues that the county is receiving, and in which turn is used to pay for governmental services, fixing roads, other things, that it can't over-regulate and tax the industry to the point where the county then loses those revenues. So what the county decided to do was to reinvest, and just to use an old model, which was to take 10% of the revenue it was receiving and put it back into the industry. So Project Trellis is a 10% diversion. We call it diversion of staff, but then people in the industry tell me like, oh, don't use the word diversion, that's a bad word. So we call it a 10%, if you're in cannabis, you know, like, oh, that's bad. So we call it 10% reallocation of the cultivation excise tax funding that comes in, goes back into the Project Trellis program. And the Project Trellis program is broken down into 3 components or 3 rails of support. One is a micro-grant program, the other one is an equity program, and then we have a marketing program. The micro-grant program is just like your typical small business micro-grant platform that you see that's duplicated in other communities for typical or traditional business, if you will, except this is aimed specifically at cannabis. So if you're a cannabis business, you don't have to be a cultivator. You can be a manufacturer, distributor, retailer, or you can be cannabis-centric. You could be a professional or a company or a business who provides services or support to the cannabis industry. You can apply for the microgrant program. This year we had approximately only $180,000 for the microgrant program to give out to businesses. We received 70 applications for support and a total ask of $1.3, almost $1.4 million. So we're hoping that next year, as we grow tax revenue, we'll be able to have even more funding through the microgrant program to give out to businesses. And the Board of Supervisors, when they created the program and adopted the resolution and the ordinances to create the program, they developed a series of what they called weighted considerations, which our application review committee uses when they're looking at applications and determining eligibility for these grants. And so these are the 6 weighted considerations. These are all available online, but the intent of the grants is to go to businesses who are majority owned by Humboldt County residents. If it's a cultivator, that it's aimed at a cultivator of less than 10,000 square feet, that the project or activity would add to the revenues collected through the cannabis excise tax, that the project or request would result in creation or retention of jobs, that the project or request would add to the sustainability of the cannabis industry, and that also a consideration if the grant or loan request is needed to help make the business solvent. So those are the considerations that the board put together when they developed this program for the microgrants. Now, that's just the microgrant piece or component. I hope, am I going to close the whole thing if I do this? Okay.
Freaking Max.
I shouldn't have done it. I should have pulled you over. There it is. It started popping. So what's interesting, I talked about Project Trellis is getting a lot of attention. We have all these other programs, but it's true. I just tell people, go Google Project Trellis because it's one of the first things that pops up in a search engine search. So from what we can tell based on research that we've done, it's one of the first programs of its kind where a governmental entity or jurisdiction has created a support program for the industry. There's a lot of regulation out there and taxation of the industry, but not very many support programs. And one of the reasons why this program was developed was because of all the services that exist for businesses, but not for cannabis. I work in the same building as Greg, and we also work in the same building as SBDC. And SBDC staff can tell you how frustrated they are that any business can walk into the building and ask for support, applying for a loan or putting together a business plan or understanding federal FMLA law. But if they're a cannabis business, they have to turn them away, and they can't offer them any supportive services. And even through REDEC and other, even local agencies, there are limitations on what can or cannot be done to help a cannabis business. So the theory behind the support program was we're getting a significant amount of our tax revenue from an industry that is at a disadvantage because they're not eligible for most of the federal programs that exist to help businesses. The second rail of the program is the equity program. The state of California, they, through Senate Bill 1294, decided that, hey, we should give some of the funding back to communities who were impacted by the criminalization of cannabis and the war on drugs. So they created this equity program, set aside a pot of funding for $10 million and encouraged communities to apply. We approached the state, the Bureau of Cannabis Control, and told them we're going to apply for about a third of the funding, and everyone freaked out. They didn't expect Humboldt County was even going to be an applicant, let alone ask for 1/3 of the funding. And there were some elected officials and state legislators who actually started trying to apply political pressure in Sacramento to block us from getting the funding. We ended up getting 1.4 million, not 3 million. But also because of our ask, the state came back and said, okay, we need more money. So they put another 30 million into the program. Of course, we're asking for 6 of that. But the intent of the equity program is more aimed at the person or the individual. So the grant program is for the business. So think business entity, grant program. Equity program is to give services or support to individuals who are adversely impacted by either the criminalization of cannabis or who, when they were working in cannabis and it was black market, and maybe there were illicit activities occurring, maybe they were subject to exploitation or some other type of incident, then we can provide services and support to those persons and individuals in the county. We've executed our agreement with the state. The contract sent it back. We're waiting for the money. We haven't received it yet. So the equity program hasn't really launched. The Board of Supervisors did create an equity program manual. And if you want to learn more about this program, you can go online to the county site. You can pull up the manual. It talks all about the program and the services that are available. So as soon as we get the money from the state, we can start administering those services. And then the third and final rail, if you will, or level of support through the Project Trellis program is a marketing campaign. This is actually where the majority of the funding went. I mentioned that 10% of the cultivation tax is, let's see, I should be able to find the budget. So 10% of the overall cultivation tax goes to the Trellis program. This blue section here on the wheel, over 50% is what goes to the marketing initiative. And the whole idea there was to increase demand for Humboldt County cannabis product so that would therefore increase supply, which would trickle down and benefit our cultivators and also the ancillary businesses who serve and support the cultivators. So we're in the process right now, we're in a deliberative competitive bid process right now. The county released an RFP, request for proposals, for a marketing consultant and a branding partner to help us with that initiative. We started out with initially 60 respondents. Half of those actually submitted proposals, and we've whittled it down. Our ad hoc and marketing committee has whittled it down to 9. So we've got 9 remaining bidders in the pool that we're evaluating, a handful of local companies and then some out of the area companies as well. So the timeline for some of the programs and projects that I've talked about for Project Trellis, the micro grant committee has 2 meetings left, and then we'll be taking a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors for grant funding, hopefully on the April 7th agenda. That's what our target is. And then the marketing ad hoc committee also has 2 more meetings to narrow down to the final 3 bidders, and then we'll take a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors that we invite those bidders to the community to do live presentations and to host some town halls and to get input from the community. Because we can't make the decision in a vacuum. We have to have the community involved in making that decision. And then the equity program, again, is just dependent at this point on receiving state funding so that we can administer the program. So I know that was kind of like, bleh. I just threw it out there. Just curious if there are any questions about the project. I was here to present on the Project Trellis program, but any questions about the program or just the economic development county initiatives in general?
What year are we in with this? Is it year 1, year 2?
It was March of last year that the board adopted the program, and then we had to do some legwork to develop the framework and put it together. So we're just past 1 year, so we're entering year 2.
And is any of that tax money that's coming back in just go into the county general fund, or
Yeah.
is it? Okay, I couldn't see what portion.
Yeah, there is, if you're interested in wanting to know, well, how much of that funding goes into the county general fund, if you were to go to the county site, in fact, I think you can just Google County of Humboldt budget. You go to the budget tab on the county's website. And then it will bring you to all of the relevant budget documents. The 2021 budget is in creation process right now. The budget brief here, if you go to the budget tab on the county site, the budget brief is a good document. And it will give you some more relevant information with regards to our funding sources, where the funding's coming from. Let me see if I can get down here to some information that actually. And if you're not able to find this online, yeah, that's like a long, it's a lot of narrative in the beginning. You get to a point, there's some graphics here soon.
Somewhere.
There we go. So you can start getting into some of the priorities, where the funding is going, what it's been earmarked for, a little bit about the process, and then looks like by page 9, 10 you start getting into the meat and potatoes of the budget, where the expenditures are going by service. You can see almost half of the funding goes to health and human services, how your property taxes are distributed, etc. But this is all available online if you want to see how the funding is being spent by the county. I should also say that the Project Trellis program, I say county, that doesn't mean that it's only available to unincorporated areas. It is the entire county. So you can be an Arcata cannabis business or a Eureka cannabis business, and you're eligible for this county program.
How eligible would somebody be that's got their main business out of state or out of the county and operating here?
So like maybe their LLC is formed somewhere else and they have headquarters. So the idea or the intent is that they're based here because the board wanted to keep the funding as much of it as possible into the community, not going out of the area. However, part of the process is discretionary, and that's why we have a committee. So an actual committee reviews the applications, and if there's a real compelling argument, yes, my business is based out of Colorado, however, X% of my operations are all here, the committee could make a determination, all right, we'll go ahead and make a recommendation that we fund this application.
So how much of the support that you give to local businesses is garbage bags full of $20 bills? I mean, seriously, how, with the banking issues, are you dealing in cash or are you purchasing things for businesses?
So what's great about this program is that it's 100% county funded, so it doesn't touch federal dollars at all. So we're able to just take funding from the general fund that's coming straight from the cultivation tax that we're receiving, and we can just put it right back into the businesses, cut them checks, and just give the funding directly to them. So we're not having to hide the funding stream, if you will, because it's not federalized at all.
Okay, so they're starting to have access to bank accounts.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. And they're starting to have access to bank accounts. We're even working, part of the equity program is intended to be a loan program. And we're working with a couple of local credit unions who have stated, well, we might be able to work something out on doing business loans for cannabis businesses if it's only county funding and we're separating it entirely and protecting our depositors, et cetera. So we're starting to get traction and having that sort of dialogue with some of the local banking institutions as well.
Scott, can you talk about what the percentage allocation is between the three programs, the equity?
Yeah. So it's roughly, I don't want to do this again. So the budget is available. The budget is available online, and I'm going to leave this. I've got the URL here for the website, and then I've got some of my business cards. You can go to the website, or you can call me, email me if you're looking for information. The budget that I just pulled up is available. Of the total program dollars this year, which was I think 800,000, 180 went to the micro grants, 108 went to equity, and the remaining balance went to the marketing program. And then there was also a 10% staff fee that goes to the county to administer it.
I'm curious, how is the cannabis industry learning about this, and how are they receiving it? Are they liking what's being provided for them?
Yeah, so when we were building the program, we went out and met with cannabis businesses to solicit some of their input, and we used some of their input to create the framework for the program. We've gone on K-Mud, we've tried to push it out through social media. We go meet with trade associations like ICFA and HCGA, trying to just put the word out through our planning and building team so that when individuals are calling for licenses, that team, the cannabis services team, is able to educate them on the program. And Loco's covered it, Time Standard has covered it, so just trying to push it out that way. I think the fact that we have almost 10 times the amount of requests as we do funding right now demonstrates, at least to me, that there's a need out there. I don't know if that means we've captured a lot of the market, but certainly the word is getting out there about this program. And we're getting calls asking, well, when does round two? When does grant round two start? And this is intended to be an ongoing program. There was no defined sunset for the program. It is intended to be reviewed on an annual basis by the board. So at some point, the board could determine, okay, we don't need the program anymore, we can end it. But right now, it's intended to be ongoing. Any other questions about Trellis or?
You mentioned a portion of that money goes to people who were adversely affected. What does that look like? Is that counseling or how does that, How is that? Because they entered through what would be considered a criminal activity, right? And then now the money is being spent to kind of counteract that. What does that look like?
So it's broken down into different types of services. Some of the services are workforce development training or skills training if they're looking to enter into the workforce into a different industry, but also training and support services to help them enter into or remain in the cannabis industry. One of the reasons why the state created this equity funding is they realized that it was difficult for minorities and some populations to actually get into the industry. And so some of the funding is also there to support with the assistance in permit fees and other regulatory assistance for the program. And we're also looking at part of our second ask to the state for funding will be to support expungement programs to help individuals who were criminally convicted, for possession or use, whatever, of cannabis.
Scott, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And again, I'll leave my cards and info if you have any question about this program, or there's so many other economic development initiatives that we're also working on. Feel free to call my office or call Greg. Greg works at the hall for me.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, thanks.
As a thank you, we did make a donation to the Wheelchair Foundation on your behalf.
Oh, cool.
So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you again for being a program.